What a Guan! Now, What a Guan is CVM TV's new Vox Pop program, Vibes Yes Vox Pop program. Hey Jamaica, you're watching What a Guan!
What a Guan!
Coming to you from Montego Bay.
Hello, my people.
What a Guan is back. The People's Program is back in full force on CVM TV.
What a Guan! That a Guan! Cross!
Need to estimate your duty? Perform a track and trace? Search for a declaration?
Then download the Jamaica Customs mobile app today. The time by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
12. Thanks for joining us for CVM News at Noon. It's Thursday, February 12, 2026. I'm Amoy Harriet. Up first, Governor General Sir Patrick Allen says Jamaica's response to Hurricane Melissa demonstrates the country's growing capacity to prepare for and recover from major disasters. Delivering the throne speech during Thursday's ceremonial opening of Parliament, Sir Allen pointed to improved disaster financing systems and a strong institutional coordination that allowed the government to respond quickly to the crisis.
Long before Hurricane Melissa made landfall, Jamaica had put in place a multi-layered disaster risk financing framework that was built on pre-positioned reserves, contingent credit, and insurance mechanisms. That preparation enabled the government to respond immediately, financing relief, recovery with unprecedented speed and scale. Within just 5 weeks of the hurricane, the government secured a US $6.7 billion financing package to support recovery and rebuilding, the largest and fastest mobilization ever achieved by Jamaica.
Finance Minister Favour Williams is warning that the damage to the country's economy caused by Hurricane Melissa means that the government will have to impose new taxes. The minister quoted the Independent Fiscal Commission, which reported that Hurricane Melissa caused an estimated $8.8 billion in damage, which is about 41% of Jamaica's gross domestic product (GDP). She says the government will not close the entire gap in the budget by borrowing, given Jamaica's troubled history of high debt levels. Minister Williams says instead, borrowing will be used to fund capital projects that can help the country's economy grow. Recurrent expenses like salaries will be financed by increased taxes.
We must now take measured steps to close that gap, and that will include new revenue measures. We could choose to finance the entire deficit through borrowing. But Jamaica has already traveled that path with negative outcomes. We have lived through the debt trap before. Decades of high debt, high interest payments, and limited fiscal space. Over the last several years, through discipline and shared sacrifice, we have reduced our debt and restored credibility. Borrowing will play a role, but it must be strategic, directed towards capital investments that build resilience and expand our productive capacity. As far as possible, recurrent expenses must be financed by recurring taxation revenues.
Meanwhile, Minister Williams insists all new taxes will be implemented in a manner to protect the most vulnerable.
Let me also assure you that equity is central to our approach. We are reviewing anomalies in the tax system and ensuring that the burden is shared fairly. The most vulnerable will be protected. The measures will be calibrated, balanced, and sensitive to the realities facing households and businesses. This approach will safeguard Jamaica's stability, preserve our hard-won fiscal gains, and finance our recovery in a way that is sustainable and just.
And we'll have more on the proposed new taxes later on in our live interview segment in the newscast. Now, the opposition People's National Party is vowing to keep the government in check with the expected new taxes. Speaking ahead of the ceremonial opening of Parliament with CVM News moments ago, opposition spokesperson on information Nikisha Burchell said recovery shouldn't be done, quote, on the backs of Jamaicans.
I heard the pre-announcement that they are going to finally accept that they are levying heavier taxes on the Jamaican people. So over the years they've masked it by giving us heavier taxes, but this year they've already announced that we should brace for heavy taxes from them. So the circumstances have forced them to be honest this year, and so we're going to ensure that they don't go too heavy on us. While we understand that we must recover stronger, we can't do that on the backs of the Jamaican people.
Now to all the news, motorists traveling along the Swansea Main Road in Clarendon are being advised of significant traffic delays following a two-vehicle collision Thursday morning. The crash involved a truck and an SUV. Preliminary reports indicate that the truck was traveling west when it allegedly drifted into the opposite lane, colliding with the oncoming SUV. No fatalities were reported. However, the driver of the SUV, a woman, sustained serious injuries. She was trapped in the wreckage for approximately 3 hours before emergency responders were able to extricate her.
We are using this medium again to speak with our motorists on the roadway and to appeal to them to be consistent in using the roadway as it ought to, drive at the required speed and get some rest if it is that you need to be rested before coming on the road. We're also asking persons driving along the thoroughfare to look out for pedestrians, look out for children on the roadway.
Now, the third prosecution witness in the Clansman gang trial, a police constable who started to testify on Wednesday, indicated on Thursday that he signed a false declaration statement about an incident that resulted in a man dying on August 15, 2017. The witness also testified that the statement that was made about the incident in 2017 was misplaced by the registry and a reprint was done in 2025. The witness later testified that he might have made a few changes to his statement, but, quote, he's not sure if there were changes made to the 2025 statement. In the meantime, Defense Counsel on Wednesday suggested that popular blog Politrix Watch by Sir P influences a 2023 police operation. Carla M. Dean was in court.
The Clansman gang trial continues today as the first prosecution witness was recalled to the stand. Now, he testified that he did not get any intel from blogger Sir P to carry out any operations on March the 5th, 2023. The first prosecution witness, a police officer from CTOC, was recalled to the stand today for cross-examination, where questions centered around whether information from a popular blogger influenced the March 5, 2023 operation at at North Avenue, where a man was shot and killed by the witness. Under questioning, the witness acknowledged that he listens to blogger Sir P from time to time, but denied ever receiving or acting on intel from him. Defense counsel referenced the witness's March 8, 2023 interview with Indicom and suggested that details about the third man who escaped on the day of the incident came from Politics Watch. The prosecution strongly objected on the basis of the context of the information given. The witness later testified that he and his colleagues would listen to Politics Watch at work. The defense suggested that during the March 5, 2023 incident, some of the witness's actions were influenced by what they heard on Politics Watch. The witness strongly rejected that suggestion, maintaining that any information they received came from multiple sources, not solely from Sir P. Efforts by the defense to introduce a document to show inconsistencies were challenged by the prosecution, who argued there were no contradictions in the witness's evidence. Carla Ramdeen, CVM News.
Police in Westmoreland are investigating a tragic discovery in the parish. The body of a 52-year-old man was found floating in the sea in Farm District White House on Tuesday night. Investigators believe he may have drowned, but wounds to the head have raised further concern as detectives await the results of a post-mortem examination to determine exactly what happened. And it's time now for a break, but stay with us. Our live interview comes up next.
Need of a loan? AIM Financial is the place to go. We have loans from $20,000 to $3.3 million. Get a loan to pay school or college tuition, medical expenses, bills, fix up your house, buy furniture and appliances, repair or buy a car. And when you're done, take a vacation loan. AIM has a loan for any purpose. Call AIM today. You won't find a better deal elsewhere. Guaranteed.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Welcome back to CVM News at Noon. New taxes are coming. That's the warning from Finance Minister Favour Williams ahead of the 2026-27 budget debate. Here with us to discuss the announcement from the Finance Minister is Economist Keenan Faulkner. Good afternoon, Keenan.
I am. How are you doing?
Not doing too bad. So talk to our viewers. Were you expecting new taxes? Why or why not?
No, I actually wasn't expecting new taxes at this particular moment because in the immediate aftermath of a crisis, normally the approach that is taken is called counter-cyclical fiscal policy. So you would now probably remove or reduce some existing categories of taxes so that you allow the economy to grow, and then therefore when the economy grows, because business activity is stimulated, then you would eventually have tax revenues rebounding. But the reality is we will now have some amount of taxes because the government doesn't want to borrow to finance the entire deficit. So it uses taxes to now make up for the rest of the shortfall. But the conversation is a little bit nuanced. So it's not that taxes are all bad. Some are more growth inhibiting than others. You're going to find that really all taxes distort economic activity in some way. So it's now for the government to determine what will the optimal tax mix look like and what the appropriate quantum will be.
So for context viewers, and I would have shared this in the newscast earlier, the finance minister says recurrent expenditure must be funded by taxation and borrowing will be done for capital projects. Keenan, do you agree with that approach?
Yes, I mean, that is the sensible approach. You know, you borrow to finance activities that will generate revenue for you to be able to repay the principal as well as the interest costs on debt. And if you have to, impose taxes, that would be for just paying for day-to-day activities. So as the minister said, it's going to be for hospitals, schools, bridges, and things like that, just housekeeping expenses. But looking at the whole tax argument, we cannot tell which taxes are going to now be levied or which ones will be introduced. But the ideal is that you should introduce it on some activities where the demand is not going to be significantly affected. So you call those inelastic activities. Again, it's difficult to really predict at this time, but that would be the best way to sort of cushion the blow for the population.
So the minister has said equity is the center of the approach. Talk to me about what you think this means about the approach that will be taken.
Well, I mean, you have to think about where the burden is going to fall. And regardless of whether or not taxes are levied on consumers directly, you're going to find that the burden is still going to be distributed when it's passed on to consumers. So you want to ensure that that is done in such a way that persons will not be exposed, sufficiently. So when you have a tax that is being imposed, it doesn't matter if you put it on businesses or consumers, it will eventually filter down into the economy. So you don't want that to be excessive.
So let me pose something else that the minister said. She said, quote, "We are reviewing anomalies in the tax system and ensuring that the burden is shared fairly." Again, what does this mean to you?
I think, in a sense, it means that the government is probably reviewing its compliance and enforcement mechanisms. So remember, tax revenues every year are not just what's generated through economic activity, but also arrears that are carried over that ought to have been paid from in the past. So if you can maximize on that, then probably that will lessen the need to now have a greater incidence of taxation going forward.
So you mentioned earlier, we're not exactly sure which taxes will be imposed, but what exactly are the taxes that you expect to see imposed?
Well, I don't think it will come from either PAYE or income tax generally, because you have corporate income tax, you have GCT, but I don't think it will be on any of those. And those two categories together account for about 60 to 70% of tax revenue. So I think it may necessarily have to come from those other categories. You're looking at, for example, special consumption tax. Those are mostly on luxury items and things like that, where you can generate some amount of revenue. But there are so many other considerations to think about. So you can't impose taxes in a vacuum. We think about, for example, inflation is now going to projected to increase. You have interest rates that are still very elevated, and now you're adding taxes to the mix. So what is the taxable capacity of the economy right now to absorb it? And that, I think, will weigh very heavily on the finance minister's mind.
So like the income tax, you said that's one of the areas I think the government is staying away from.
I think so, because you have already committed to reducing it. And in GCT, you would not want to increase GCT at a time to then now have to reverse it later on. So you don't put permanent measures for what should be a temporary time frame. This is just a period that the Jamaica has to weather over the next, say, 3 to 4 years, and then hopefully things will get back to normal. So taxes, for that reason, now just need to be targeted, sharp, and temporary.
Now, leading up to the election, there was this big statement going around: no new taxes, even from last year, no new taxes. And we'll recall that one of the election promises was to lower the personal income tax rate from 25% down to 15% over the next few years, starting this year. Do you think it's a case where the government can keep this promise considering the new taxes?
I think they may either have to delay it or rescope it. So you promise to still decrease it, but maybe not to the extent that you initially promised, because we have to admit that the fiscal dynamics and the position of the country is not the same as it was prior to Hurricane Melissa. So taking those realities into consideration, we have to adjust accordingly, and that might mean, deferring implementation until maybe 2 or 3 years down the line.
Now, they've been deliberate in ensuring to tell us that the vulnerable will be protected. But from where you're standing as an economist, do you think that the regular man and woman in Jamaica right now, the vulnerable group, might feel the effects of these new taxes that will be imposed?
So the best way to go about protecting the most vulnerable is that if you have to impose those taxes, then the additional revenue you generate should now go into the sort of programs and policies that will alleviate the plight of the most vulnerable. So you collect it, but then you ensure that you're spending it where it's distributed mostly to those who need it. So for the most vulnerable, that in that way, they would be cushioned.
All right, thank you so much, Economist Keenan Foughton. And just before you go, is there anything else on this topic where these new taxes are concerned that you think is important for viewers to know or for viewers to anticipate going into the budget debate?
So what usually happens is that revenue measures are announced towards the end of the budget debate, and that doesn't normally augur well for predictability, but it is now being said that the revenue measures will be tabled simultaneously with the estimates of expenditure today in a couple of hours. So that's not typical, but it's a welcome move because it augurs better for